Hey everybody, this is your video for 5-7. So on this one of the things we're going to be doing is solving by finding square roots. We're also going to complete the square, and there's also some which are review type problems about finding the vertex, focus, directrix, etc. So let's get started. To start with, it says solve the equation by finding square roots. So we have 3x squared equal 147, so we're going to divide by 3, and so we get 49. And so x squared is 49, which means x is plus and minus 7. We don't just want the principal or positive square root. If it's graphed, you would see both. So just as a quick thing, because I can't spend too much time on this one, if you do 3x squared, that would open like that, and then 147 is here. So I would actually need to change this to be like 200, and then you see a negative and a positive. And so that's negative 7 and positive 7. Okay, so that's the first one. On the next one, we have x squared minus 121 equals 0. So then you just move your 121 over and take your square root, and you get 11. By the way, just as a reminder, for learning perfect squares, you could do f1 of x equal x squared. So if you do this, then quickly you will catch on about what the numbers are. Go to your table, and then there's 1 with 1, 2 with 4, 3 with 9, 4 with 16, 5 with 25, and so forth. And you can just scroll down. And so there's 11 with 121, and so forth. So if you want to use this method with a table, you can, or if you wanted to go square root 121, you get it that way also. So again, it just means what two numbers do you need to multiply to get that. And so it would have been, on this part, it just shows you the positive. It would have been like 11 times 11 gives you 121, but it's also negative 11 times negative 11, which gives you positive 121. So just like before, you're going to get two answers in these. Now, if it turns out that it's a word problem, sometimes the negative answer doesn't make sense. So anyway, there you have your two answers. So you can say, look at your table. And then we also said on the scratch pad, you could do square root of 121 equal 11, which only gives the positive. But if you did a negative 11 times negative 11, that's also 121. So again, need both answers. All right. On the next one, we have 3x squared minus 21 equals 0. So one way to do this is to bring the 21 over to this side, and then divide, and so you get x equal plus and minus square root of 7. The other way is if you have a 3 that you want to factor out, you'd get like that. And so then divide by 3, so you have x squared minus 7 equal to 0. At first I was going to put something around it, but I really don't need to. on this one. So that means x squared is positive 7, so x is plus and minus square root of 7. Okay, so there's that one. The next one says a rectangular swimming pool is 10 feet deep. One side of the pool is 1.5 times longer than the other. The amount of water needed to fill the pool is 3,840 cubic feet. Find the dimensions. So how we start this one is say x is the smaller side, and then the longer side would be 1.5 times x. And remember, you're dealing with volume, and you have length times width times height. So you're going to have x times 1.5x times 10, because it's a 10-foot deep pool. Now when you do 1.5 times 10, you get 15, so it's an easier number to work with. And so this is 15x squared equal to 3840. Now divide by 15 to get 256, and take your square root, which gives you 16. Now we only want to use the positive because we can't have a negative length or negative width. So we know one dimension would be 16 feet, and to get the other we do 1.5 times 16, which is 24 feet. So the dimensions of the pool would be 16 feet wide by 24 feet long. Okay, on our next one, we have x squared minus 12x plus 36 equals 64. What we want to do is recognize this part. You're going to want to factor first, because you can do the square root of 36 to be 6, and 2 times 6 is 12, which matches this. This is a negative 12, and so the numbers match. So in other words, factor it, and so this would turn into x minus 6 squared equals 64, so that's like a substitution. And now you want to square root both sides, and so you have x minus 64, x minus 6 equal plus and minus square root of 64, which is basically plus and minus 8. So you do still have to get both the positive and negative answers. Now, once you have that, then you say x minus 6 equal positive 8 and work it out to get 14. But you also need to say x minus 6 equal negative 8. And so add 6 to both sides would give you negative 2. So those are your two answers. So again, don't forget the negative 8, which would lead to the second solution. Okay, on the next one we have 4w squared plus 20w plus 25 equal 225. So just like the one before, we want to check to see if this is a perfect trinomial. So we take our square root of this and we get 2w, and we take our square root of the 25 and get 5. Then we want to check the middle. So when we say the middle, that means we have to do 2 times the product of these. So that means 2 times 2w times 5, which would be 4 times 5, or 20 times w. And 20w is indeed what we want, so that's why there's a little check mark there. So because this is a perfect trinomial, then you can say this is 2w plus 5 squared. Again, if you need help with this middle part, just think multiply these two together, get 10w, and then double it. So it did work. Double 10 and you get 20. Okay, so the next step would be take the square root of both sides, and the square root of 225 is 15. Remember your plus and minus, and so you say 2w plus 5 equal 15, work it out to get 5, and 2w plus 5 equal negative 15, and then subtract 5 to get negative 20, divide by 2 to get negative 10. So those are your two solutions. The next one says complete the square. It's a little bit different type question. So on these, you're not able to use your calculator. It's not like something you can graph. So you have to learn the process for completing the square. So you have ax squared plus bx plus c. And the process is basically going to take b, divide by 2, and then square it. So that's going to be your process. And then once you do something to one side, then you're going to have to do it to the other. And that's going to be the complete process. On this one, you just have to do part of it because they just want what this number is at the back. So what you do is you divide this by 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. 5 squared is 25, which is your answer. Now, what that means is that x squared plus 10x plus 25 is equivalent to x plus 5 squared. So when you did your 10 divided by 2, you got 5, so that's what you put here, x plus 5 squared. Again, this is called a perfect square trinomial, but your only answer is this 25. And you would just use this 5 to do this. Okay, on the next one, they want you to do the same thing. You have negative 30, and you divide by 2 to get negative 15, and square that to get positive 225. And so that's your answer. So that would be your perfect square trinomial. If you had x squared minus 30x plus 225, that would be equivalent to x minus 15 squared. Okay, now here's where they get a little bit more complicated. As I was saying, if you do something to one side of the equal sign, then you have to do it to the other. That's kind of going to be like the addition property of equality. So to start with, we have x squared plus 9x minus 4 equals 0. Add 4 to both sides, so there you go. And then they want you to start this process like you did on the previous ones. You take 9 over 2, and that's 4.5. And then you want to square 4.5 to get 20.25. Now, when you do that, that means you would say x squared plus 9x plus 20.5 equals, and then you have to bring the 4 down. And if you added 20.25 to this one, then you're going to have to add 20.25 to this side, which is really just 24.25. So that's basically your explanation of it. And that's with decimals. Now, the problem with that is in Math Excel, they want fractions, and so it looks a little bit more complicated. If you change 20.25 to a fraction, you get 81/4. And if you change 24.25 to a fraction, you get 97/4. So as a reminder on how to do that, you go to your calculate screen on the scratch pad, type 20.25, menu number, convert to fraction, and there's your 81/4, and you would do that same thing for the 97/4. Okay, so that's how we come up with those fractions. Also, you could just think, well, it's 20 and 1/4, and 20 is the same thing as 80/4. So there is a way to do it mentally. But anyway, the next step is you would divide. You have your 9 halves, divide your 9 by 2, and so this would turn into x plus 9 halves squared equal 97/4. So like we said before, this part turns into x plus 9 halves squared. And so then this is where it's going to look a little weird to you for the first time. You're going to take your square root of this, but you can't change it to a decimal. You have to keep it as a square root symbol. Now you're going to have to learn how to do these, because throughout pre-calculus and the rest of Algebra 2, you're also going to have to use the square root symbol. So you can't use decimals. It wants an exact answer, not decimals, which are rounded. So when we simplify this, we get x plus 9/2 equal plus or minus the square root of 97 over 2. Now what I did was I took the square root of 97 over 4 and I split it like this, and that's the easy way to think of it. The other way to think of it is, say, the square root of 97 over the square root of 4, which is basically the same thing. So anyway, once you have that, then you just bring this term over, and both of them had 2 for the denominator, so you'd make this one negative, and so you have negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 97 over 2. So that's your answer. There are going to be a few of those that we have to do, so don't just skip this once, because you're going to miss like 5 to 10 of them if you do that. So just learn this process. You learn by repetition. On this next one, we have x squared minus 14x plus 18 equals 0. We move our 18 over. Then we take our negative 14, divide by 2 to give you negative 7, square it to give you 49. So what that means is, when you're completing your square, you would add 49 to this side, but you'd also have to add 49 to this side, because you can't just randomly add a number without adding it to the other side. So then this would be x minus 7 squared, and this would be 31. Now when you take your square root, this would be x minus 7 equal plus and minus the square root of 31, and so then you just move it over, and so it's just 7 plus or minus square root of 31. And that's the exact same form that it wants. Right now I'm just trying to give you a reasonable answer. So you want this not negative 38.97 something or 12.57, you know. Whoops, I did a times right there. This should be a minus. This one was 1.43. So you can't convert these to a square root. See, if you try to take this number and you want to make it a fraction, but you really want to make it a square root, that doesn't exist. You can't do it that way. So you just have to do the math old-fashioned, you know, just work through the process. On the next one, you have one step harder. So the difference is, on the previous two, you just start with x squared, but this one you start with 9x squared. And in order to complete the square, you're going to have to not have a coefficient other than 1. So your first step is going to be divide by 9 to all terms, basically. So you have x squared minus 30/9 x equal 5/9. And then 30 divided by 9 is equivalent to 10/3. Remember, on the calculator, you can just type 30 divided by 9, enter, and it reduces the fraction for you. So there's your 10/3. And now they're going to want you to complete the square like we did earlier. And so you divide by 2. Now the difference is, if you have a fraction divided by 2, what we like to do is we like to say that divided by 2 over 1, and you multiply the outsides, which are called your extremes, and multiply your insides, which are called your means. So negative 10 times 1 is negative 10, 2 times 3 is 6. And then negative 10 6 is equivalent to negative 5/3. So remember, multiply your outsides, they go on top. Multiply your insides, they go on bottom. And then simplify. Okay, so then once you have your negative 5/3, you want to square both the numerator and denominator. So you would get positive 25/9. So then this side becomes x minus 5/3 squared, and this side becomes 5/9 plus 25/9. And 5 plus 25 is 30, and you keep it a 9 for your denominator. It doesn't change to 18. Okay, so there's the first 11. On number 12, we have 25x squared plus 60x equal 11. Again, we need to have a coefficient of 1, so you have to divide by 25 to all terms. So you have x squared plus 60 25ths x equal 11 25ths. And then 60 divided by 25 reduces. You can do that on the calculator and get 12/5, or just do it mentally. Both are divisible by 5. 60 divided by 5 is 12. 25 over 5 is 5. So then you're going to take your 12/5, divide by 2, which is 2 over 1, multiply your outsides to get 12, multiply your insides to get 10, and 12/10 is the same as 6/5. So then once you do that, you do 6/5 squared, which is 36 25ths. So you replace this left side with x plus 6/5 squared, and then you take your 11 25ths and add your 36 25ths to it, which is really 47 25ths. Now the next step is you're going to take your square root of both, and so it's going to look weird. X plus 6/5 equal plus and minus the square root is 47 25ths. So when you take your square root of 25, you get 5, and so you can split it up like this as negative 6/5 plus or minus square root of 47 over 5, or you can group these together like we do sometimes, and you have negative 6 plus or minus square root of square root of 47 over 5. All right, so those are really good set of problems. Now they also, in this section, which it still says 5-7, it's 5-7-26, they want you to do some things we did in some earlier sections. So that's why I put review here. It says rewrite the equation in vertex form, then find the vertex, focus, directrix, axis of symmetry, the direction of the opening, and the y-intercept. So this one problem has a lot of answers. So to start with, we have y equal x squared plus 4x plus 1. It wants it in vertex form, and to remind you what that means, it means you have y equal a times x minus h squared plus k, where hk is your vertex. So just to remind you what we did before on a previous section, you would first add graph and do x squared plus 4x plus 1. There's your graph. Now you want to do analyze graph and get the minimum, which is between here and here. So you'd make that -2 comma -3. That's your minimum. You also know that a is 1 because there's no number in front. And so that means your equation is y equal x plus 2 squared minus 3. And you know your vertex answer is -2, -3. So the next thing is you're going to need to get your focus, and so you can use your calculator. You do menu, analyze graph, which is 6, analyze conics, which is 8, and then 3 is foci, plural of focus. And you see the little arrow, you got to move it towards your parabola, and then there's your answer. I just clicked it. Now, the problem like this, as you may remember, is this has it as a fraction, and it says 11 fourths. It's -2 comma 11 fourths, but you have to make 11 fourths a decimal by doing Control Enter. So that's your 2.75. So hopefully y'all remember that, that in this one problem, this type problem, they wanted a decimal instead of a fraction. So there's your steps. You go menu, analyze graph, analyze conics, and then foci. You move your pointer to your parabola to get this ordered pair, which means -2 comma -2.75. So that's your answer. Now the next thing is, if you just judge the distance or judge from -3 to -2.75, your difference is just 0.25. Okay, and so we have to go even lower than -3, and so you go -3 minus 0.25 to get -3.25, which is your directrix. So you have y equal -3.25. Also remember, when we went to the graph on this, if we went to analyze directrix and clicked it, it shows it as a fraction. I'm going to hit escape and move it. And this was -13 fourths. And then we'd have to say -13 fourths as a decimal is -3.25. Then for your axis of symmetry, that's the easy part. It's based on the x of the vertex. And so if we had -2 comma -3, that means this part is your x. Remember, it's an HK ordered pair corresponding to xy. So anyway, just this number, so it's x equal -2. It's the vertical line, x equal -2. So this is a parabola that opens up, and then to get your y-intercept, the easiest way is just to do Control T. Control T to get your table, and there's 0, 1. That's the easiest way. You could have plugged in a 0 here and said 2 squared is 4, 4 minus 3 is 1. So it's 0, 1. Okay, so that's the review type problem. There's also another one like that in a little bit. But the next problem is find the positive value of k that would make the left side a perfect square trinomial. So on this one, instead of trying to figure out the back part, we have to try to figure out the middle part. So this one, you're given x squared minus kx plus 25. Remember earlier we divided by 2, and that's like getting b over 2. So b over 2 squared would be 225, and so then we take the square root of both to get 15. It's plus and minus 15. Now to solve for b, we multiply by 2, and so 2 times 15 is 30, so your answer is 30. So this would be with positive 30, where it's x plus 15 squared. This is where it's negative 30 with x minus 15 squared. But basically 30 is your answer. The next one, solve the quadratic equation by completing the square. you have x squared plus x equal 10, and so we want to find b over 2 squared. In this case, b is 1 because there's no number in front, and so 1 over 2 is a half. 1/2 squared is 1/4. So now we want to add 1/4 to each side and simplify. So x squared plus x plus 1/4 equal 10 plus 1/4. And by the way, this left side was equivalent to just saying x plus a half squared. Because remember, we know our half. So it's like what we did earlier. So x plus a half squared is 41/4. Take your square root, positive and negative, and the square root of 4 is 2, so now just bring this over. So you have -1 plus or minus square root of 41, all of that over 2. Okay, just a couple more. This one says rewrite it in vertex form and find the vertex. So this one we started with y equal -2x squared minus 3x plus 6. The first step on this one was to factor out a -2. When I started, I forgot that I needed this to be 1. So that's why there's something marked out. So first you factor out a -2 because we need this to be 1. And so to do that, we have -2 times x squared, so that's your -2x squared. Then for this part, we need a -3x, and so we've got to say -2 times 3/2. Okay, so that step could be hard for some people, but basically you're just dividing it by 2 and changing the sign. So think of -2 times 3 is -6, and then divide by 2 is -3. So that's what you're doing. And then you keep your 6 the way it is. So then, just like we did before, you take your 3/2, you divide by 2 over 1, multiply your extremes, and you get 3, your means, and you get 4, so you have 3/4. Now you square it to get 9/16. Okay, so this is where you would normally say add 9/16 to this side and add 9/16 to this side. The problem is they want everything on the exact same side of the equal sign. And so this could be probably the hardest one if you don't know about how to do this. You basically are just going to move this term over. Okay? And so that's why we're going to end up doing a minus. The other thing that's a little hard about this is because this -2 is factored out, we've got to do -2 times 9/16 to both. So here you have -2 times x squared plus 3/2 x plus 9/16 plus 6. So all that's the front. And then on this one, you need minus, and then what you had factored out was -2, and you're doing 9/16 to it. And so this is like plus 6, then a negative times a negative is a positive, 2 times 9 is 18, so this is 18/16. Then we just need to do our math. 6 plus 18/16 is 57/8. Okay, and that ends up helping you because your answer is -2 times x plus 3/4 squared plus 57/8. And then if you have that part, then you can get your vertex from just changing the sign for x and keeping this one the same. All right, then the last one is back to completing the square. They're doing x squared minus 4x equal 3. So you divide by 2, you get 2, and then square it, and you get 4. So you're adding 4 to both sides like we did. So this looks like x minus 2 squared equals 7. Then you're going to square root both sides, so you have x minus 2 equal plus and minus square root of 7, and then just move this over, and so that's your answer. Okay, so that'd be the end of that video. You probably need to take your time to work on these, and just work on a few a day. Do about 5 or 6 a day, because that's better than doing all 17 in one day. That's what I would recommend, at least. All right, have a good day.